Bonjour, world of YouTube, and welcome to my Gojira Discography review. French, prog, death, groovy metal icons to me. One of my favorite metal bands now. Like, I love these guys so much. I think they have an incredible catalog, by and large. I think that they're very talented players. You know, the Duplantier brothers, Joe and Mario, on vocals and drums, respectively. Jean-Michel Labadie on the bass, and, you know, Christian Andrew on the guitar, on the leads, the beautiful leads on a handful of these records. You know, I like their socio-ecological spin, the perspective that they give on their feelings towards issues that affect the world, you know, in a very ecological sort of way. I love their love of whales. You know, I think that they're just a really cool band, and I think they're very talented. And today I'm going to be breaking down all 7 of their records. And the subject of this video was actually the winner of the poll done by my patrons over on my Patreon. I threw up the question, which band who dropped a new record, band or artist, should get a new discography review this year? And this beat St. Vincent and A Day to Remember by a landslide. And if you would like to help participate in polls to help select content for the channel sometimes, join the Patreon. You also get a lot of other goodies. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started breaking down.
Hold on a second. I cannot believe I was about to drop this review without talking about the Godzilla era. I heavily debated, and this is why I don't bring it up during Terra Incognita, but I heavily debated on mentioning the Godzilla stuff, and I figured I would never really have a other way to do so other than to just make another video later on saying I should have done it in the first place. So I'm going to sit down and talk about, or at least a bit about, the Godzilla era of this band's career by talking about the 4 EPs that they dropped under the moniker Godzilla before they reformed under the banner Gojira. Now, the big difference you'll see if you're listening to this out of any sort of morbid curiosity is that the style is much more in line with the debut of Gojira, Terra Incognita. In fact, a majority of that album are a series of tracks pulled from their last 2 releases as a band, Wisdom Comes and Saturate. However, going back to that older stuff sounds even more raw than Terra Incognita did. And in fact, in the case of at least Clone, if not also On the Bota, because of that just unnerving sinisterness that creeps in from the additional sounds, the production on those songs I honestly like a little more. One of the things you'll hear me talk about with Terra Incognita is it feels like this sort of weird oddity if you're jumping onto the band from this point. However, I do say that if you like death metal, start with Terra Incognita if you've never given Gojira a shot. But I would go even further right here to say, listen to all of the Godzilla stuff if you like the sounds on Terra Incognita or you like vintage death metal, because, like I said, you'll hear rawer versions of their earlier stuff on the last 2 EPs, and the first 2 EPs, Victim and Possessed, have some just great vintage death metal, whether it's the overall rawness and heaviness in tracks like the title track of Victim or Rigor Mortis, to Possessed, even ways of expanding beyond that, because it keeps a lot of the heaviness there, like on Possessed, the title track, or Brutal Abortion, but the closer, Mandragore, already sees them trying to sort of burgeon out their ideas with this acoustic number that is beautiful. It's a beautiful acoustic outro, and I love these EPs. I think that they're really, really good. You know, like I said, Gojira are an incredibly consistent band, and outside of a different bassist in Godzilla, and the bass production on here is more in line with vintage death metal, so the bass has this very unique tone, or this very distinct tone. I do think that you get to see Alexandre Cornillon shine, even if I do like the bass work from Jean-Michel Labadie just as much. But yeah, these Godzilla EPs are definitely worth your time if you like that vintage death metal style. You know, especially on Possessed, you can hear a clear, somewhat death influence, which I think is cool to hear a band like Gojira tap into. Like I'll talk about when I get to their debut, Terra Incognita. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about their albums proper.
Now, like some other lists I've done in the past, this bottom spot was very hard. I was split so heavily between these bottom two for their very own, very specific reasons. I feel like The Link was sort of edged out by the next pick in line because while I appreciate a lot of what this record does for the band conceptually, I feel like the production on this record does a good bridge between the vintageness that was on Terra Incognita with what I would consider to be their golden age of material, juxtaposed with the more natural, rootsier feeling style of production and the percussion like on the title track, or some of the interludes like Connected and Tori. It creates this overall great dynamic experience. And even in the moments where they slow it down but stay incredibly heavy, like on Indians or Inward Movement, do a great job at breaking the pace of the record up pretty well as well. And I like a lot of the lyrical threads painted on this project. The pondering of transcendence, the fear of, going forth into the world, pondering going beyond the world itself, like on Embrace the World. There's a lot of really grand presentations in the lyrics that I think hit incredibly well. I just think that they build upon this foundation so much better in the other records that come after this, like on parts of From Mars to Sirius and The Way of All Flesh. The overall airiness on parts of Magma and that percussion that I talked about on the most recent record, Fortitude, that experiments with that, like on Amazonia. I enjoy that foundation a lot. It's just not nearly as good as any other record in their discography to me. Still fantastic. Still love how absolutely heavy and dense it can get at times. The death metal stuff that's here is done incredibly well. I just like the other records more. But I do think that The Link is a good link in their discography. If you are getting into the band through Terra Incognita, which I think is a decent starting point, and you want to bridge to the rest of their catalog, The Link is there, and vice versa. If you like their more contemporary stuff that's a lot more melodically leaning, but you want to hear them even heavier, start with The Link and go into, Terra Incognita. It's a good stepping stone record. It's a quintessential stepping stone record in terms of their discography, and I think that it's great. Still, it's just on the bottom of my ranking. Terra Incognita I just like more than The Link, because while the production on The Link feels more in line with the rest of the band, I feel like on this record they utilize traditional death metal styles a little better than their ambition on The Link. For as much as I love The Link, it feels a bit beefy at times. It feels like they're elongating for the sake of elongating. But Terra Incognita feels a little more focused. It's still got its proggy stuff, or it's still got its weird time signature stuff. But by and large, thanks to a lot of the generally isolated feeling coming from some of the lyrics, like on tracks like Clone and Lizard Skin, even transcending past that into more abstract concepts like existentialism in the universe, like on Space Time, or how getting swept up in the monotony of things, to getting carnal, like on Fire Is Everything or Blow Me Away. This album just has a sense of rawness to it that just draws me to it every single time. I think that it's a great starting point for them, because it showed that they would be sort of out there in some regards lyrically, but that they would have this tightness in their musicianship that is incredible. I like the overall tightness in the blast beats on here. I think the leads on here are gorgeous, like on the opener, Clone. They create this really sinister style that I think works incredibly well. I even think something as innocent as the track 4, if anything, creates this sort of unifiedness with them as people, and the fact that, again, two brothers are sort of a kinetic part of some of the creative aspects of this record, or of this band's career in general. I think that it's a great starting point, too, if you enjoy death metal, because I could see some people that really love tried and true death metal being turned off by some of the more recent outings. But I feel like to get into the band, if you really want to enjoy aspects of their career, this is a great point to start, and then going to The Link, like I said, if you want to hear them get a little more progressive and you can get into sort of style of production that they would carry through the rest of their career. You know, I think that this is still a great starting point for some, and it's a really good record at its core that I feel like shouldn't be slept on. At least by those that got into them through their most recent work and want to hear them get a little heavier. So while I don't hate Fortitude, because I think Fortitude is very much a solid release, I feel like its shortcomings are sort of accented shortcomings that I have seen from their 2010s output. You know, I like the further integration of melody into their vocal work and harmonies, like on The Trails and Hold On. I think Hold On is a much better tune than The Trails. I think The Trails is a bit monotonous in its styling. And I think overall, for the other heights that I see on this record, like on Born for One Thing or Another World, continuing their brand of heavy technical styles of metal, along with Amazonia's furthering of their, you know, ecological messaging that's seen at the core of the band's sound, still thriving in a great way. I think that the stretch from Fortitude into Sphinx is one of the weakest stretches on all of their records. You know, I think that it picks itself up after that. I think the closer, Grind, is really good, and Into the Storm is another good heavy song as well. I just feel like the record really takes a fumbling there. I don't like the fact that the title track is just used as a build-up to one of their more underwhelming songs in their career to me, with the chant. You know, I feel like it's a point where it feels the most monotonous, in a way that I don't like to say about a band that I hold very near and dear to my heart, but that's how I feel about that stretch on Fortitude. I still think when this record shines, it's better than The Link in Terra Incognita for how well they sort of burgeon the band into coming into their own, but I do think it's very much a far cry from the rest of what has been a golden age era for them that saw them continuing to grow and form sounds from The Link, inject some more traditional song structuring and melody and hook work incredibly well, while not losing sight of concepts or their overall mission statement as a whole. You know, I still think Fortitude is a great notch in this band's belt. It's just one of the more derivative and boring releases I've heard from a band who I still think has a lot of talent and fire left in their veins. La Fin Sauvage, their 2012 album, sees a band just throttling in their own pocket. You know, it's a band comfortable with their ideas and their sonic palette as a whole. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I feel like this shows the band's talents in a lot of really good ways when it comes to heavy riff work, great leads, a good use of harmony that they would then toy with and soften up a bit more in the next couple of records, but also sees them sort of riding in a pocket in some points that feel a bit autopilot-ish. I do love this record as a whole. While revisiting this discography, it may have been the record I've gotten the most spinning out of, because there is some comfort to be felt in a lot of the grooves, like on the run from Explosia through Liquid Fire. It feels like just an onslaught of great triplets, incredibly good riff work, good rhythm usage, and again, that harmony on full effect. And what I like about this record is that post its big sort of soft crescendo with the Wild Healer, they continue to throttle a back half that does have a lot of the same as far as great groove construction, but they break that up with some really interesting moments across the back half, like on the cool leads on The Gift of Guilt, or the overall softness in the beginning of Pain is a Master. You know, I enjoy a lot of the dynamics on this project, and that's why it's sort of sitting at this point in the discography review. It has none of the pitfall seen on Fortitude, or any of the, you know, bare bones elements that coat the bottom two records, but it still feels a bit caught up in itself at points, and that's why I appreciate the record I put above it, above this. But I feel like if you have enjoyed their last couple of records, this is a great bridge to what I would consider the golden age. You know, it's a good presentation of what made The Way of All Flesh and From Mars to Sirius thrive as records, but it's not quite to the same level as those. It is still a great record, and I feel like it's another good gateway stepping stone experience, similarly to the link into parts of their career.
I would even argue that similarly to Amputecture by the Mars Volta, this is a great gateway into the band as a whole if you want what makes Gojira work without any high concepts. Because similarly to Amputecture's zany jazziness, this has got that groovy riffage with them heavy crescendos that Gojira does so very well.
I really enjoyed Magma when it came out. I had seen it getting an odd amount of hate, and it didn't make sense to me, because while they were doing more melody work vocally, like on the opener, The Shooting Star, or on Lowlands, the 6-minute just groove session starring Mario Duplantier and his drum kit, you know, I still appreciate what this record does to introduce that into Gojira's discography, because a lot of the heaviness that I came to them for and still go to them for still hits. Like the leads on one of the singles to this record, Silvera, the great, never-ending, propulsive drum groove of The Cell. The title track's leads feel like great expansions on their lead style seen on the records of theirs that I really enjoy. And I even like the softer, more instrumental side of this record, like on the Closer Liberation. You know, Yellowstone sounds a bit Ford truckish.
Your dick's gonna come from these Ford trucks.
But outside of that, this record packs a lot of punch. I'm still not all that crazy about the other single from this record, Stranded. I think while it's kind of quirky, like, oh, they're doing bare bones polyrhythm style, that's neat. The record just has other dazzle that I like much more than Stranded. I can see if it has fans, but it's never been a track that I would, you know, go to bat for in Gojira's discography. You know, but this record outside of that is incredible. You know, I really love a lot of what the guys are doing here. You know, I feel like they get really personal in ways that are on Terra Incognita, like on the opener, The Shooting Star. You know, the boys were griefing at points when writing this record, and it showcases, but in a way that still feels intrinsically them. And I love this for it. You know, I feel like if you enjoy this newest record and you haven't listened to Magma, I feel like that's an essential thing to listen to if you like that record, because it has a lot of what makes Fortitude good, but done more Gojira-esque on Magma. I love this record a lot. I think it's quality, and I think it's another good sort of expansion on ideas seen on Les Frères Sauvages. Yes, if you know me, you already knew these two spots were probably going to go to these two records because of everything I'll have to say about the next record. This continues the doubling down on ecologically driven lyrics, like on the 1-2 punch of Toxic Garbage Island and A Sight to Behold, which just are anti-pollution and fuck you people for killing the earth jams. And even getting a little more visceral and religious with it at points, with Wolf Down the Earth. It has a heavy, heavy focus on death, the death of it all. Auroboros introduces the concept of discussing cyclical life, life and death, you know. There's that line in the chorus of death is just an illusion, but the record itself continues to hammer down other aspects of death and transcendentalism, like on the Silver Chord, Yama's Messengers. You know, the art of dying with its weird time signature also delves into death itself. The title track, obviously, talking about everything crumbling away. But amidst all of that bleakness in the lyrics, the sonic palette of this album is just beefy as hell. The guitar work on here is spectacular, whether it's the tap-led leads on Auroboros, the fun Gojira chord stuff, like on Toxic Garbage Island, the groove on Adoration for None, which has Randy Blythe on vocals. The drum production on here is fucking stellar. I love the way this record sounds, and I think sonically, constructive-wise, these guys are firing off on all of the right cylinders. You know, for all that I'll have to say about the next record, this is easily another one of my favorite metal albums of all time. I think that it is incredibly heavy. It is so very visceral. And again, the parts where they branch out of that into some quirky or softer ideas, like on The Art of Dying, or the sort of softish drones at the end of Auroboros, are a welcome break from all of that intensity. You know, I love what this band does here, and I feel like if you like the record that comes before this and above it on my ranking, or you like heavy music in general, listen to The Way of All Flesh. It's heavy as fuck, and it's great for it.
And this personally was my jumping on point into Gojira. I got into them because of the Randy Blythe collaboration and because I'd heard that they had done environmentally charged lyrics like on Toxic Garbage Island. I sampled those songs and I was immediately hooked because of that production style and just how technical they show off on those songs and on the record as a whole.
That euphoric bliss that I reach when I listen to some tracks from The Way of All Flesh, or even Fortitude, or Magma, all have the best representation of that feeling on From Mars to Sirius. Whether it's the end before the last drop of Ocean Planet, you know, the point where they're screaming from the sky on From the Sky, you know, the whale stuff on Flying Whales. This album is just transcendental. The tapping on global warming is just so incredibly bliss-inducing.
And when the vocals come in under that by the end of the song to create that chant, it's just...
The drum work on The Heaviest Matter in the Universe, or Backbone. Backbone's multifaceted rhythm section in general is glorious. I adore this and think that it is easily one of the best metal albums of all time. And on top of all of that heaviness and nuance, the lyrics are just even more of that ecological stuff throttled to 100. This whole album is a concept about the death of the earth and whales and a whale planet, and just, it's great. I love From Mars to Sirius. It's a beautiful album. A lot of the beautiful, again, ethereal stuff just hits so hard. It's so very resonant with me, along with that lead production and everything at play. There's this murkiness to the production that I think just works so incredibly well at creating a modern version of like a vintage death metal production. I love the production on this record. I love the vocals. I love how just dynamic Joe Duplantier sounds vocally. I think Mario is incredible. The bass strikes before the drop on From the Sky just fills my bones with joy.
And after getting into Gojira from The Way of All Flesh, because I liked their, you know, environmentally progressive lyrics, I liked that this record focused on that even more, while having a concept surrounding one of my favorite animals that I've always been an advocate for the safety of.
This record's incredible, one of the best metal albums of all time, and easily Gojira's best. And that was my Gojira discography review. Did you like it? What's your favorite Gojira album? Let me know in the comments down below. If you did like this video, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more of my music, gaming, and general nerdery content, be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons if you want to join the ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community. It's linked in the description. I'm going to get out of here, though. I have been Vowel Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.